If we haven't met before, I'm Sarah, an end-of-life planning advocate, normalizing conversations about end-of-life and estate planning before those conversations are necessary. I don't have specific statistics to back this up, but so many people, too many people, don't do any estate planning or end-of-life planning. The number I see most often is about 50% of people don't make any plans, but the numbers vary wildly based on how the specific question is phrased. I'm sure the reasons people have for not doing any planning are largely the usual suspects of estate planning excuses. I don't want to think about it. If I make an estate plan, I'll jinx it and then I'll need that plan. That's just for rich people. That's just for old people. I don't care what happens to my stuff after I die because I'll be dead. Another reason that some people have for not making any estate plans is that they think that if they don't do any planning, it will all just magically take care of itself. There is the tiniest sliver of truth there, but even so, I will count this as a myth that I need to bust. The tiniest sliver of truth is that there are laws in place to determine what happens if you die without a will. Intestate is the fancy legal term for dying without a will. So there are processes that will spring into action if you die without a will or if you die intestate. However, and this is a massive however, those laws likely aren't what you'd expect them to be and likely aren't what you'd want them to be. I can basically guarantee that those rules are not what you would choose for yourself, at least if you're not married. Every state has its own intestate laws, but they are all some version of determining who is your spouse if you're married or your nearest blood relative if you aren't. They use what's called a consanguinity chart. Now, you don't need to know that word, but it's one of the favorite terms that I learned in law school, so I thought I'd throw it in. A consanguinity chart is the fancy legal term for a family tree that shows how close people are genealogically and legally speaking to the person who died. Your state's consanguinity chart will determine if your first cousin twice removed or your second cousin once removed is legally a closer blood relative to you. By the way, in California, your first cousin twice removed is considered a closer blood relation in case you ever need to know that. The process for who will make medical decisions for you if you are incapacitated vary a little bit more, especially in an emergency situation, but they're generally usually based on similar relationships of blood or marriage, so I'll generally lump them up together for purposes of this discussion. Near the end of your life and after you die, you are involved in two very massive, traditional, and very stuck in their red tape ways institutions: the medical system and the legal system. These are not institutions that are known for their compassion or their flexibility. The courts and hospitals want cut and dry. They want to look at a chart and know who should be in charge. They want to look at a chart and know who should get your stuff. The person who is closest to you on the family tree is more important than the person who is closest to you emotionally. Courts and hospitals do not want to quantify friendship. How much you valued someone, how much they were involved in your life does not matter. Best friends, chosen family, and unmarried partners are all entirely excluded from intestate laws. If you are surrounded by people you love, but who are not legally tied to you by blood or marriage, those people will not be part of your official end of life. And by official, I mean medically or legally speaking. Without a will or other legal paperwork, your nearest blood relations will decide if you are buried or cremated, what name or what gender is on your headstone. They will get your stuff. Your third cousin, who you maybe never met, might get everything while your best friend gets nothing. members you might be estranged from could be making decisions about what will happen to your body. This isn't the result that most people, at least most unmarried people, would want or would choose for themselves. Default rules are funny things. They are designed to work for the average person, but in doing so, they generally don't really work for anybody. It's the flaw of averages. I will resist going off on a tangent about how the US Air Force discovered their own flaw of averages as it relates to plane construction, but I will resist since it isn't related to this topic at all. And I know not everyone loves a good factoid tangent as much as I do, but I'll put a link in the show notes for an article on the subject if you're interested. And if you love tangents too, let me know in the comments. I have been trying to do videos that pretty much stay on topic, but if my factoid-filled tangents would be a welcome addition to my estate planning topics, I will gladly throw them in. Look at me. I made my love of tangents a tangent. Anyway, back to your blood relations being the only ones who matter if you don't plan ahead and don't do the paperwork. But what if you look up and consider who would be in charge if you didn't do any paperwork, and you are okay with that person being in charge? Are you off the hook? Can you then avoid doing any estate planning or any paperwork? Nope. Sorry, not sorry. Even if you are okay with the default person in your location being in charge, remember that end-of-life planning is more than just writing your will and naming who gets your stuff. It's documenting your medical wishes in an advanced care directive or living will. It's documenting your email addresses and your other passwords and all of the stuff that you subscribe to. Even if your default person is the person you want to be in charge of making decisions for you, they will need a certain amount of information in order to do their job. For example, for me, if I didn't appoint a healthcare agent in my advanced care directive, my brother would be in charge of making medical decisions if I were ever incapacitated. I would be fine with that appointment, but my brother hasn't been a part of my daily life since we were teenagers. If he were to make medical choices for me, he would greatly benefit from having some idea of what's important to me now as an adult. Without some idea of what I would want, he could very likely forever second guess what decisions he made. Were they the right choices? Is that what I would have wanted? Likewise, if I didn't have a will, my brother would be in charge. I would be okay with that too, but he, I think, doesn't have the first clue where I bank or where my retirement accounts are held or what streaming services I subscribe to. Well, he could maybe figure that one out based on the TV recommendations that I've made to him over the years, but that is sort of my point. Don't make the person who will be your executor have to also play detective to piece together the details of your life, like that meme of Charlie Day in front of the conspiracy board with the red string. To manage my or anyone's estate in this digital age involves so many passwords and codes and services that are auto-billed and auto-renewed, it would be downright cruel to make anyone have to figure it all out without some sort of list. I feel like I need to summarize my point a bit since I maybe went down a few tangent-filled rabbit holes there. If you don't do any estate planning and you don't complete any paperwork, your state's default laws about who should manage your estate, and remember, estate may sound like fancy rich people stuff and you might envision mansions and jewels, but estate is just the fancy legal term for your stuff after you die. Everyone will have an estate. If you don't do any estate planning or paperwork, your state's default laws about who should manage your estate and who will get your stuff will kick in. Those rules vary, but are always some version of determining who is your spouse if you're married, or who is your nearest blood relation if you aren't. How much you valued someone or how involved they were in your life doesn't matter. Your best friends, your chosen family, your unmarried partners are all entirely excluded using those default intestate rules. If you want to ensure that the person you want to be in charge will, in fact, be in charge, you need to do the paperwork. And even if you are okay with the person who would be in charge using the default rules, you should still make a plan. It provides them guidance. It gives them guidance on what medical choices you would want, or if you want to be buried or cremated. It lets them know what services you subscribe to and what your email passwords are. It prevents extra confusion and stress. The title of a good Wall Street Journal article on the topic says it all: the confusing fallout of dying without a will. A link to that article will be in the description. I think there should be a sequel to that article, the even more confusing fallout of dying when your people don't know if you have a will. How much time would your people have to spend looking for a will if you died tomorrow? It prevents, or at least minimizes, second guessing. A person charged with making medical choices for you, whether it is the person you chose or the person who is there by default, they might have to make some difficult, gut-wrenching, and maybe near impossible decisions. It is not unheard of for those people to second-guess their decisions for a very long time. Is that what they would have wanted? They did mention that one thing that one time that maybe, even with your guidance, they might still second guess themselves, but they will feel better if they have some guidance from you to follow. And a final reason you should make an estate plan, even if you're okay with the default person: rules change. Laws can change, often with little fanfare or no notice to the people impacted by them. If you move or if something happens while you're traveling, a new set of rules might apply to you and a new default person might be in charge. So what do? I'm a broken record, I know, but do the paperwork. Especially if the people closest to you in life are not tied to you by blood or marriage. If you are surrounded by unmarried partners, chosen family, and best friends, the paperwork is critical. Complete an advanced care directive or a living will. Appoint a healthcare proxy. Write your will. Document your accounts and your passwords. Start a when I die binder. Make sure that the people you want to be involved will be able to be involved. Make sure that they will have the information they need to take action. Sure, the legal systems, the medical systems have processes in place to have somebody make decisions on your behalf if you haven't made those plans. But do not rely on those systems. Do not make your people rely on those complicated, antiquated, and red tape filled systems. Do the paperwork.